So what I'm going to talk about today is this possible add-on or approach to DAO governance. And let's start out with this problem, which is very familiar to people in the room, is token-based DAOs have entrenchment problems. And we can put, one way to categorize those is there's two types. There's explicit control, which is structural. So explicit control is always possible because when we have a market for tokens, some party can buy a stake large enough to gain effective control. What we actually see empirically is, and I can do some empirical slides later if people are interested, is that we see this both in token holders and delegates, like the Nakamoto number, which is the number of delegates or token holders that reach over 50% of the tokens. That number is small for a lot of DAOs, shockingly small, because that's a structural part. But then the second thing is implicit control. And that arises even if there structurally looks decentralized. We have a lot of passive holders that don't vote. And many of you are aware of the percentages. The percentage of participation is often very low. And a lot of this is rational, or arguably rational. And we know some of the reasons why. One of the reasons is the Jensen-Meckling problem, which is if I own a very small number of tokens, if I spend a cost to become informed, almost all the benefit of that's going to flow to others. So the incentives are really suboptimal. So here's a question: how many people? Let's just think about this. Are you so I'm a free rider, essentially. I'm free riding other people's efforts. Are you a Jensen and Meckling free rider for at least something that you own, some cryptocurrency, index fund? How many people are Jensen Meckling free riders? Okay, that's like, is it everyone? I have the curious question, is anybody that didn't raise their hand? Okay, so this audience, we're all Jensen Meckling free riders, okay? And then there's the paradox of voting, that if I have a small holding, the chance of affecting the outcome is very low, and then there's costs of voting. And then there's portfolio investors, okay? So if I'm a portfolio investor, then it diminishes to some degree my incentive to invest in one protocol. Why? Because I have the competing protocols in my portfolio, and some of that investment is just going to be versus the other protocols. So why should I do that? Okay, so all right, so this is widely observed, and both of these imperil decentralization. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a mechanism of auction-based control where control is going to be contestable. You can always have a new auction, okay? It's also going to be temporary. We're going to put a time limit on the period of control. And we're going to get periods of temporary control by a single party, but we also are going to have periods where we default back to the default governance method, which often is going to be voting. Okay, now one powerful thing about this is winning the auction doesn't depend on owning or controlling any tokens. Okay, so this is going to make this very different from the current corporate setting. One way you can think of it is there's philosophical ways to discuss this, like Vickery, Henry George. We can talk about hardware taxes and stuff like that. They're all kind of related to this. But basically, think about the corporate setting. Mark Zuckerberg can no longer keep control. We could push him out in an auction, okay? The other thing about this is that empty voting. So what's empty voting? That means that I have votes, but I don't have the corresponding economic interest. A classic thing we see in the corporate setting is we see massive borrowing of corporate shares before votes. So what are people doing? They're borrowing the shares. The lender retains all of the economic interest. If there's a dividend, the lender is going to get it, but the borrower is the voter. And let me just, all right, now we're going to do our first jump here. Okay, so there's two aspects of this that are going to be important. We have empty voting. There's also the other side. Most times when we have empty voting, there's another side. Somebody has ownership without voting rights. And sometimes you can hide that way. We can hide being an owner. Why? Because the registered person that has the token is is still voting, okay, but I can own part of the economic thing without being, and it's going to be very hard to find me. And that's going to be important in what we're going to talk about. Now, here's something thing to think about, is delegation is empty voting. That's what it is. I delegate my tokens. I still have the economic gains from that. So that's just something interesting to note. And empty voting there's a huge corporate literature on this, and a lot of it is a lot of people are troubled by the possibility of empty voting, especially because it can be hidden, because it makes outcomes indeterminate to some extent. We have a corporate control contest. Much can depend on how good you are at compiling empty votes, which is financial engineering. There's lots of ways to do it. You can do swaps. You can do derivatives. They have very low costs, okay? And there's also the possibility of malicious actors. They accumulate empty votes. If I get a bunch of empty votes, I get control. I have no economic interest. I buy a pile of puts and I crater the DAO or the corporation. Okay, so this is a serious problem. Okay, let's go back to our main presentation here. Okay, so now the idea that I'm going to show here is going to be limited to certain kinds of DAOs. And in the paper I define them. By the way, there is a paper. That's the paper. I'll put this up. I'll just leave it up for now because I can talk about economic DAOs without the slide. So what's an economic DAO? There's two things that are required. There has to be a token market. It's publicly traded tokens. And here's the most important one, is the token value has to reflect the value of the DAO project. And that things like Maker or arguably Uniswap, that is plausible, especially if Uniswap turns the fee switch on, darn it. Okay.
Try it.
Okay. For other things, so that you might think, well, a lot of things aren't commercial. I mean, that's the whole point of a lot of DAOs is that they're doing things that are kind of social or public, things like nouns, okay? But here's the interesting thing. It still could be the case that the value of the project is reflected in the token value. Why? You love nouns. Everybody loves nouns. We're going to go and try to buy a bunch of tokens and do nouns. And it's going to push the token value up. So I don't know how broad this is, but this is important to realize that the approach here is only going to work for what I call economic DAOs. Okay. Now, one other thing that's important, and this is a pet peeve of mine, is one thing that's true of DAOs is that the community is not just the people that hold tokens. It's people that could possibly buy tokens. So the community is much broader, and this causes, I believe, in our space of thinking about DAOs, a big problem, because a lot of times we take the nation state as the paradigm of democracy in a nation state. Well, a nation state, you have high costs of exit, okay? And you're kind of stuck there. And it's a different governance problem. We have to deal with all the people that are there. And so a lot of times we apply things from the nation state, and I think that can be a big mistake. Okay. All right. So what are going to be our goals for our auction mechanism? Okay, well, the other thing about token value, we have papers that are quite familiar to a lot of people that, maybe token value is a bad thing. But there's a counter argument, which is if token value is linked to the value of the project, it creates a great opportunity for governance. Okay, and my paper is going to exploit that opportunity. So what are we going to try to do in the mechanism? So we'd like to do two things. The person that wins the auction, we hope that they have the, quote, best plan. What is that going to mean? It's going to be the plan, we're going to define it as the plan with the highest social surplus. That is the generated extra token value over the cost to the party that's doing this is going to be the largest. That's what we want. We're going to be able to get that in the mechanism. Then we also would like this, and this is a little bit more subtle. So we're creating surplus. The person doing this project, the person taking control is creating surplus. We'd like to give as much of that surplus as possible to the other token holders. Who is that? Jensen Meckley. It's you. It's us. We're going to give you all the surplus. Now, why are we doing that? You're a bunch of free riders. I could put another F word in front of that. Okay, you're a bunch of free riders. Why should we give you the token surplus? Well, here's the argument, and this is a standard argument in the finance literature. Okay, so what we'd like to have is, when this DAO starts, we'd like it to reflect the maximum possible actual value that it's going to generate in the future. What would be the ideal? Every time there's an innovation in the future, we like if all the surplus could flow to the other token holders, who are the people that inherited the thing from the ownership flowed from the beginning, then we're going to maximize the startup value in a way that's economically rational. It truly reflects then the total potential of this. And if we fail, if some of this surplus leaks to the person that's doing the project, that's not going to be true. And this, of course, is true as an ongoing investment, not just at startup. Okay? So you, the Jensen Meglin holders, not only do you want the surplus, you also, it's going to increase the value of your token if in the future the surplus is going to go to whoever the token holders are then. Question? Oh, sorry. Let me go. I'll go to the back first.
We just want to hand whoever's asking the question a microphone.
Yeah. Where is it?
The mic landed.
Hey, you're good. Who's first question? Tell us, Jeff.
Whoever. Take the person, Arun. I think it's Arun.
There you are.
And then Bo.
It's just a definitional question. When you say an economic DAO,
Sorry, one sec.
Okay.
Richard, this looks so cool. Thank you.
when you say an economic DAO, are you really thinking like the classic finance equivalent for firm, or are you defining it in a different way in terms of its end goals? So I kind of see like economic, maximizing market cap would be a very like normal goal for a firm, but are you saying? So I see similarities but differences. So I just want you to like clarify.
Well, the interesting point is that it would include, the classic firms profit maximizing. We're maximizing. We're going to create the highest net present value of actual cash flows. It includes that case, obviously. But the interesting thing is it extends beyond that. To what extent is not clear, but it might extend broadly beyond that. Why? Because I have a social club. We have a social club. Now, the social club, we're talking about DAOs that have publicly traded tokens. We have a social club, and you have to buy a token to get in the social club. Well, if everybody wants to come to the social club, we have some club and, Saturday night, and there's like, the whole block is like thousands of people outside, and, then we're going to raise prices, right? The token price is going to go up. Well, that's reflecting the quality of the club, right? And so that then having an auction and picking the best possible plan to create that quality makes sense, right? Even though it's not a classic economic project. Okay, does that make sense? Now, I don't know how far it extends. This is just an idea, and I think it's going to be tested on some small startup DAOs pretty relatively soon. See if it works. Then maybe we can consider for bigger DAOs. And I'll come back to that. Why bigger DAOs might want to do it. Okay, but anyway, Bo?
Question, or do some.
Go ahead.
Oh, all right, thank you. Just logistics. Yeah, I just had a question around like the free rider definition here, because like if I take the analogy here to like a company and shareholders, we don't generally think of shareholders as free riders because they're providing capital for the equation of whatever is getting built. So like.
Right, but they're free riders on the effort. So like take me. So I have, this is a bad admission, okay? But I'm going to admit it anyway. So I have some maker tokens, but I don't do jack. I don't like vote, okay? And and I have Uniswap. This is terrible. I have Uniswap tokens.
It's not terrible.
And I'm like all right. And so what am I depending on? A16Z, baby. Like they have like, listen, they have 20%, they have 20 or 30% of the tokens. And not only that, I think they're doing this really intelligent delegation. Okay, this is my Stanford blockchain club here. Okay, and I'm happy to free ride on their effort. I'm not making any effort. So you see, I'm free riding on an effort.
So this is specifically the governance effort.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm free riding. I'm not making any effort. I'm free riding an A16Z, and I love it. I'm actually really happy. All the stuff about whales, It doesn't, well, it bothers me sometimes, but sometimes, I don't know. I mean, I'm not so sure about this, okay? And I have a second paper on that, but anyway, that's not for today. Okay, Bo, you had a question?
Would you consider delegation within a governance model to also be free riding? Like if you're delegating for shareholders, when they delegate their shares to somebody else to
Yeah,
do
of
a
course.
proxy vote for them?
It's like I'm
Okay.
delegating to somebody else, and delegation has a lot of problems. Tomorrow at 11, I'm going to maybe do a presentation of a second paper that's in progress that really, delegation is really problematic in my view, because it has these huge coordination problems and stuff. But when I delegate, I'm exactly doing that. I'm saying, I don't know, I don't want to do anything here. Here's a guy, really smart guy. I know this is a really smart guy. I'm going to delegate to him, and I'm going to free ride on Vaughn.
Isn't it delegation without compensation though? Like if you're paying, then it's not necessarily free riding because there's a cost to you.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, but paying has its own problems, as we know, and that's something that I think is really shaky at this point. Okay. Besides even specific pathological examples, I think in general it's a really difficult thing to figure out. Bo?
Yeah, so that was very similar to my question, which is this surplus of extraction ideal. I mean, are you pretty much thinking of the free riders as investors, like in a traditional company, right? Like,
I mean, listen, we want to make this perfectly clear.
Yeah.
Jensen, Meckley, free riders sounds bad, but they're good. We are good. You're good. You're providing capital. Yeah, free riders. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. So similar to the point. I'm not sure what your name is. What's your first name? Leo. Oh, I'm sorry, Leo. I couldn't recognize you because the bright lights behind you. Yeah. But it's kind of angelic. This white cloth behind it's like, I like it. Okay. All right. Let me move forward here. All right. So here's the context. We'll start with this context. So we have here's the project. Here's a project, a business plan. So we have a current token value of P sub 0 times 0, the price at time 0. That's when the auction is going to start. A business plan would be the idea that we can raise the token value to V, and there's a cost C. Okay, I'm going to start using pictures more here. Okay, so what is this? We're going to talk about this picture a lot. I don't have a laser pointer, but all right. So here's our starting point, P0, and if we can raise the value to V, what are we going to do? We're going to create this giant rectangle of added value, this top rectangle that has this green part, this blue part, this white part, and this gray part. That's the added value we're creating, but we also have a cost to the person running the project. That's this red here. Okay, so this piece here, the white part, and I'm not supposed to touch the TV, sorry. Okay, so we have the white part and the gray part. That's social surplus, okay? That's social surplus Y, because that's the value we're generating above the cost, okay? All right, so let's go back to slide 6 here. Okay, and then here's the social surplus being defined here, but the picture is maybe better. There's going to be a best plan that some party has. I'm sitting here, and Vaughn has a bunch of plans. There's going to be a best plan. Well, the best plan, which we put the stars on here, is the one that has the most social surplus. Okay, that's just setting the context here. So how is the bidding going to work? Question?
Yeah, just a question on some of the definitions on the graphic.
Oh, the graphic, okay. Yeah, can I come back to that? Because,
sure, okay.
I'm sorry, I screwed up my, let's see, where are we? 7. Okay, so how's the auction work? Okay, so a bid consists of 3 numbers. It's a surplus claim. That's the claim of, I'm claiming that I can hit a certain target for the token value. We're going to call that S, okay? And then I'm going to make, that's a value claim. I'm claiming a certain value that can be reached. And then I'm going to have, and again, I'm going to go back to the slide here. I'm going to have a surplus claim. I'm going to say, I am claiming, in this case, this blue rectangle. I'm claiming that amount of the surplus. It's going to be transferred to me. We're going to do that, and I'll explain this. We're going to do that by freezing out a portion of the holdings of the other token holders. Let me explain that right now, in fact. So how are we going to get this block R to this party? So we're going to allow this party, if they specify this R, and if they win the auction, they're going to be able to buy this amount of tokens from the other token holders at the price P0. Okay, so this is a freeze out. We do like corporate, control terms. This is a freeze out. Why? Because I'm forcing you to sell tokens to me at below the target below the target price.
Is it an option? I can execute it later, or I need to execute?
It's gonna get executed by the DAO automatically.
Once
All right,
the
so
option is converted.
yeah. So one thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna try to make all this stuff code feasible. What I mean by that is we want it to run with code. We don't have to have outside parties, okay, and so on and so forth, okay? So what's going to happen is, just to get, this is a detail that's not so important, we're going to, for the person that makes the bid, they have to make a deposit equal to the purchase price of all these tokens that they're claiming. They put the deposit in. If they win the auction, the code, we automatically transfer a portion of everybody's holdings. This portion equal to this divided by the holdings, the total holdings. We transfer those at P0 to the winning bidder. Okay. Now notice that you okay. So this is we're getting freezed out. Justin Meckley, we're getting frozen out here a little bit, but this is going to be a good story in the end. Okay, we're getting frozen out on some of our tokens. We get to free ride on all the rest of them. We're going to free ride. We're going to get this. We're going to get the white part and the gray part. Okay. All right. So let me go back here. Let me track through this. The third part is I shouldn't have gone back. All right. The third part is I'm going to have to disclose. I'm going to have to disclose any toehold I have at the start of the auction. I'm going to have to disclose as the bidder my token holdings. Okay. And why? Because this is TB is my token holdings to begin with. I'm going to get part of the surplus from my existing token holdings, and we need to take that into account. Why? Because the auction is going to work by the bids are going to be the bids are going to be evaluated on the size of the surplus. Okay, we're going to compete on how much surplus we're going to provide to the other token holders. To calculate that accurately, I have to know this green piece. If the bidder can hide this, then it's going to look like they're offering more surplus to their token holders, but some of the other token holders is them, they're hiding. I'm hiding back here, I'm getting some of that. I claim I was giving you the surplus, but I'm hiding back here and I'm getting some of it myself, okay? So we're going to have to stop them from doing that. And this is going to be one of the hardest challenges for the mechanism to do in a code feasible way. Okay, and we can talk about, this is what I call toehold reporting. We can talk about that. It's actually interesting. It involves identification. One of the biggest problems, one of the most interesting aspects of DAOs and crypto in general is we need to be able to identify who that they own, we need to identify the tokens that are held by the bidder. Well, we have, it's a classic problem. We have all these pseudonyms. They might have 5 million addresses where they're holding tokens. Okay, but that's something we can come back to. But we need to do that for this to work. Okay, all right. All right, then here's a crucial part, is not only do you have to submit these 3 numbers, you're going to have to make deposits. And a mathematician, I have little pieces of myself, different parts of myself. I have one part that's a mathematician. They would say we can simplify this and just have one deposit. We can have one deposit, and then we're going to have rules that tells you how much you get of the deposit you get back based on certain conditions. I didn't do that because having these 2 deposits makes it understandable to a human being, like what's going on here. Okay, now what are the deposits? So we're going to have a value deposit, and I didn't define it as an equality. I defined it as greater than. And what is this? What's all this? Well, let's go to the picture. Okay. So in this case, the winning bidder is going to have to deposit something greater than the white part plus the gray part. That's what that greater than means. So what are they doing by depositing that? Well, what's this deposit going to do? Well, if they fall short, if they never reach V, they're going to have to pay the shortfall to who? The Jensen-Meckley free riders. Okay, now what does this mean? Question?
But it could fall farther than the initial price. So.
Right. And see, smart guy, I feel good because that was my next thing.
Okay.
So I have a smart listener. I'm on the right track here, I think. Okay. All right. So what is this? You can think of this. This is a commitment. I'm claiming that I can get V. I'm committing myself, and the deposit's going in when I bid, and it's sitting there, stuck there, and and so this is a value deposit. I'm committing myself to getting to this level. What does that mean for us, the Jensen-Meckley free riders? We don't care where this person fails in the project or they succeed. If they succeed, our token value goes to V or above. And if they fail, they pay us. So, don't you love this? Like, isn't this great?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, question?
Yeah, do I have?
You can talk loud
I
enough.
can just talk loudly. So basically, I'm coming into this DAO and I'm saying I can promise 20% growth, and if it fails, I will pay you 20%.
Yeah, you pay. So this is like you can't.
All the risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like the bidding is not like something. Oh, I think I'll bid today.
Yeah.
Like this is not that. If I bid today, holy cow! I'm all right. And now let's go to Robin's question. Okay, now that we're going to have a second deposit, it's a surety deposit. And when we add the two posits together, it's going to cover this case, Robin's case, I think it's Robin's case, is where what if we end up below P0? Okay, well here's the thing. Again, you're going to have to pay. What if, and this is important, what if, now we're going to allocate control to this party, and we're going to do it through the equivalent of empty votes. We're going to create what the paper calls a dynamic voting pool. So during the control period, we create imaginary votes, and I always have more than 50%. I have at least a little bit more than 50%. So this is dangerous. We're creating empty votes. This person might buy a bunch of puts and try to destroy the DAO, right? They might tank the DAO. Well, if they do that, the sum of these two deposits, now you can set them at different levels, and there's different reasons to, but let's just think of the simple case. If we set the sum of the deposits as equal to the entire value of the DAO at the start of the auction, okay, well, you tank the DAO to 0, we just slash your deposit, and you got, the malicious person, they got nothing. They got nothing from you. They can't steal from you. Isn't this getting cooler and cooler? All right, they can't steal from you, and you're sitting there, remember, you're a Jensen-Meckley. You're passive, I don't know. I've got Maker, I've got Uni, but I don't vote. I have a big portfolio. Okay, all right. So let's go back here. Here's the auction parameter. We already explained that. The auction parameter is equal to. It's equal to the white plus the gray. So the bidders are competing to provide the most possible surplus to who? You, Jensen-Meckley. Okay. All right, we got to keep hammering this point. And there's going to be a reason for this. This is going to play into like regulation and stuff like that. We'll see, okay, if we get to that point, all right, which we will. All right, this doesn't matter. Okay, here's the freeze out feature. Now, there's something important about the freeze out feature, and there's something important about the freeze out feature. So why are we doing a freeze out, okay? Well, here's the classic problem called the Grossman-Hart free rider problem. If everybody are small holders and they can't coordinate, they find out that this party is just think of a tender offer, just think of corporate terms. They find out somebody's going to make a bid. What's going to happen? Well, we know what happens, right? The price goes up, right? Where does it go up to? This is, something like V. But now what if that happens here? So we announce that we're going to do this project and we're going to go up to V. This is going to go, and we don't have the mechanism. It's going to go up to V, and guess what? We only have a toehold, and it doesn't cover our cost. So we're not going to do this. And you know who's going to lose? The answer is always the same, right? You're not going to get this surplus, okay? So we have to fix this Grossman-Hart free riding problem. And by the way, there's a strong argument and that regular corporate control market is crippled. Why? Because we have all these restrictions, like you have the Williams Act, so you get more than 5%, you have to announce I have more than 5%. I have to tell you why, because I'm going to take over. Well, guess what? And so that's going to be a problem. And then we have things that allow management to kind of block. We have poison pills and things like that. And the regular market is crippled with one exception. If there's a merger of two companies, the managers of the two companies can set the price of the merger, and they can do this. They can partially freeze out. They can get some of the surplus to the needed party. And when we look at the empirical things, those are the only things that seem to be creating value in the corporate space. So we're kind of doing the same thing as a merger here, something you can't do just without doing a merger at this point in time. By the way, we have a crippled corporate sector. We put this mechanism on DAOs. Gonna beat them. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Where are we here? Okay. So more details. So here, these are about some of the results. So one result is bidders are going to choose their best project to take to the auction. Why? Because they're competing on social surplus. They're going to choose a project with the biggest social surplus. And then this is like a second price. It's going to be an English auction, a second price auction. We're going to set, because of the way we set the deposits and things like that, that greater than for the value deposit, that's required to prevent people from making a bid higher than what the value what they think is. We set it all up so that we get the revelation principle. They're going to tell you V star. So the winning bidder is going to tell you their truthful valuation. That's their dominant strategy. All right, so we have an English auction. And but the paper talks about having other kinds of auctions, like we could have a sealed bid first price auction and so on and so forth. And the paper, by the way, is very modular. The paper, anything like this, if this idea ever works, I almost guarantee you it's not going to be like the paper, right? We know that, right? Because we're going to experiment with it. Holy cow, like Strnad, like, well, what was he thinking? He left out this aspect. We have to fix this by doing this, okay? And it doesn't matter, how good your first paper is, okay? So, and what's going to happen, okay? Well, the sad thing is we're not going to be able to extract the full amount of surplus. And why is that? Well, it's obvious from a second price auction, okay? It's more likely that instead of looking like this, that it's going to look like this, okay? The winner of the auction is going to be able to claim more than over their cost. Now, why is that? Because there's a second, the winner is going to win, and it's going to be at the second highest price, right? And so that means there's some room to claim some extra surplus, okay? And if you look at the literature, there's a huge, gigantic literature on this. Full surplus extraction in general in a game is very hard to do. There's some very special circumstances, there's certain conditions under which you can do it, but generally you can't do it by using any mechanism. Okay, so that's sad. By the way, there's a psychological principle. You never end with sadness. You put the sadness sort of near the beginning, and then you have it get really exciting and fun near the end, and then people forget. It's like, I don't know, anyway, but that's a little bit out there. Sorry about that. All right, so where have we gotten so far? Okay, well, we see we've gotten rid of entrenchment. Now, does that enhance decentralization? We can examine the claim that it does. We can do that. We'll do that later. We defeated empty voting. Empty voting doesn't matter. Voting doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many tokens you have, empty or not. We selected the best, highest surplus project. Okay. We have a tendency to distribute the surplus to the existing token holders. That's Jensen-Meckling free riders. And that maximizes the investment value, but it's imperfect. Okay, we have some leakage. We avoided value destruction. You destroy it, you pay. okay? And we can make those deposits, by the way, bigger than the initial value. We can make the deposits the size, we can make the deposits the size of this whole thing. Not only do you have to pay the part you destroyed, but you have to pay the part you claimed you could do. We could do that. There's different trade-offs with the deposits we can go into later.
Could you hold that question? Sorry, where's the microphone go?
Oh, right here. Thanks.
Oh, somebody have a question?
Sure, I want to get these in there. Thank you.
By the way, if, if anyone has an answer, I would love to have an answer as well as a question. just encouraging. Like,
Well,
you know.
given one of the goals is to dilute the power of the entrenched interests, if you have a large enough surplus, you're going to need a large deposit to be able to secure everyone else. So how does the deposit work? Because whether it's the actual deposit or the surety deposit,
Okay.
you still need somebody putting a lot of skin in the game. And to me, only the entrenched holders can afford to do that. So how do you get around that problem?
Okay, so here's, this gets more into some qualifications or limitations. Okay, so this is a lot of money. MakerDAO, Uniswap's like 6 billion, roughly market cap. We're talking $6 billion deposit, okay? Maker is like, I think, 2 billion. Those are the biggest ones, right? Okay, and then Compound is sitting there, right? So this is a lot of money. And now here's the thing. It might be, I'm going to pick Cole, okay? So it might be Cole has the idea of how to, he's working in, the Stanford Blockchain Club. He figures out a brilliant way to double Uniswap's value. Okay? Now, I don't really know how much, I mean, Cole might have like, Cole might have $6 billion, but he's a student, okay? So I doubt it, okay? So what is he gonna do? Well, he's got some contacts already, like, he can call up A16Z, right? Okay, so what are you gonna have to have? For this to work, you have to have capital market depth. You have to be able to go out and fund these deposits, okay? And this is going to start looking a little more corporate because we fund the deposits. Now we have Cole running it because we don't need Cole's his idea, right? I don't know, A16Z. I don't know either, right? I don't know completely. I trust Cole, right? That's why I'm putting the money up. So then we're going to do some kind of management contract. It's going to try to do what? It's going to try to get, despite Jensen Meckling, we don't know how many tokens he has. It's going to give him the incentives that match up with completing the project, okay? So that looks more like the real corporate world, and that's kind of it's a management contract thing. Okay, so Robin?
So think about, say, real estate.
Microphone. Thank you.
You're good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, he might fall under the mic exemption.
Okay.
Like, I think I fall under the mic exemption. I think I'm more like, here's my role model here. I think like Vaughn, I'm talking loud enough, I don't need a mic, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that,
Okay.
anyway.
So think about real estate with a Harburger tax,
Okay,
right? So there's the idea like the market for real estate is kind of have high transaction costs. So if you set a Harburger tax, then it'll be easier to buy. And then the way to improve a property is if you have a way to improve it, you buy it, you improve it, and you sell it.
right.
Now you seem to be saying that the analogous process here would be inefficient because you're basically asking them to put it as much money as it would take to buy the whole thing. And if there was a Harburger tax on the stocks, then they would just buy the whole thing, improve it, and sell it again. But you seem to be suggesting that would be inefficient, and this would be better because something goes wrong if you just buy it, improve it, and sell it.
Well, let's look at the Harburger tax. So Harburger tax. Here's the first one. Before I answer your question, let me just make the analogy, okay? So this paper would be the Harburger tax equivalent of this would be Vaughn owns a house, okay? And I say, okay, we're going to do Harburger tax, okay? And what's the value? And how does the Harburger tax work? Well, you say the value, but I can buy it from you at that value. So the idea is, well, that incentivizes you to say the true value, right? I mean, more than that, you're willing to sell it, okay? So what's going to happen? So we're getting the seller's true value, okay? But what we're not getting is I'm going to get all the surplus, though, okay? He sells at P0. The analogy is he sells at P0. I'm going to get all the surplus, and guess what? The Jensen Meckling free riders, I mean, they're not getting, this is no good, right? Isn't this no good? We're not getting anything. Like, come on, we don't want
I
this.
mean, you have this goal of wanting the initial price of the asset to reflect its long-term accumulated value.
Yeah.
But we also have the goal of having the people who increase the value put in the marginal effort. So
Right.
if they get the full value of their marginal effort, that optimizes their effort to improve the value. So
Right.
you're trading off reducing their effort to improve the value for giving the initial holders more capital investment. It sounds like I'd rather
Okay,
prioritize improving than over
All right,
giving
here you
initial
go.
value.
We're not doing that trade-off. Why? Because we have, let's go back, see, so we're going to create the optimal, we're going to create basically optimal post-auction incentives to perform. Why is that? It's because of the deposits, okay? So if I think about the margin here, I'll do the economist. Right? We have a super economist, right? So I'm going to I have to do the economic argument, right? Take my math hat off, take my law hat off, take all this, put the economics hat on, right? All right, so if I fall short by $1 here, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose $1 on my own position, and I'm going to have to pay $1 on this entire position. So this party, the winning bidder, does not have a Jensen-Meckling problem. They face 100% of the gains and losses. So they have optimal incentives, optimal. They're going to provide the amount of effort that socially we would want because they face all the gains and losses. Now, there's a little tricky part here. What if they hedge this part? Like empty voting, we can hedge this part for basically nothing, okay? Well, then we have to start thinking about it, right? So who would want to hedge? Well, a malicious party, they want to tank the DAO. They're going to hedge this part out, right? Because they're going to tank the DAO. They don't want to lose on their own position, right? But now what about parties that want to succeed? Well, why would they give up this? Well, there are reasons, okay? It could be that this whole thing is such a huge part of their portfolio that they're better off hedging part of it and giving up some of the gain, okay? So then we might have to have a value deposit. We might have to have a value deposit that's bigger, okay, for that kind of party. But here's the problem, it kind of depends on the party. If we have institutional, if we have coal here and we have A16Z sitting there, or somebody, those big parties basically are arguably, this is a classic argument, they're basically close to risk neutral. Why? Because the idiosyncratic risk of this project is, they're going to basically put this into the world. They themselves have investors. They're going to transmit all of the risk out to other people, and they don't have to hold it. They can optimize the amount of risk, and they can just go for expected value. Okay, so that's, and the paper, by the way, what we've been doing so far is, this is a classic economics move, okay, that I hope you'll let me make. You'll let me make it, and I'm sure you'll complain, which is appropriate, okay? You're supposed to complain, right? So this is a deterministic model we've been doing. We haven't considered, this is crypto. So we've been pretending as if the only thing that's affecting the price is the performance in the plan, okay? Now, is that true of like crypto? Like, crypto is so stable, right? Like, no kind of outside forces cause things to fluctuate around. And so maybe this model is valid. Wrong, okay? So we have to consider, we do the economic model, and then in the second appendix of the paper, we consider how this plays out in what I call a stochastic setting, which is like closer to the real world. What actually happens is you have to adjust some of the deposits to take into account the risk. Why is that? Well, think about the value deposit, okay? So we're saying if you hit this target, if you do the right thing, you get the whole deposit back, okay? Okay, well that's fine in this deterministic world, but what about stochastic world? I do the right thing, and Bitcoin goes from a little over 65,000 this morning to 17,000. Guess what's going to happen to my token price? It's going to be down here, right? Well, it wasn't my fault, and now I have to pay pay all these things out. So what's the point? On the other hand, if the token price goes above here, it doesn't affect the deposits, okay? So we have an asymmetry. I bear losses when we have a shortfall because of the other stochastic factors, but I don't have the gains. That is an expected value that's negative. And so the idea is that optimally we're going to adjust the deposits. In the appendix, I argue we can do that. And listen to this. I claim that it's possible to do that in a code feasible way, where the code executes the profit. That may be a little, you can read it. I don't want to go through that part, but all right. So
my main point was that if this is the right way to do stocks or thing, then it's a critique of many other kinds of property we have that maybe we're doing it wrong there. Like we're doing we're doing paintings wrong, we're doing cars wrong, we're doing real estate wrong, because the same arguments would apply. You can improve those assets, and whoever buys it to improve it to sell it is stealing from the initial owners their potential, and you have a critique here of all the other kinds of property implicit in this recommendation doing this way.
That's right, absolutely right. And sadly, I can claim almost no originality. Why? Because William Vickery, like continuous auctions, like if you look at the Lally and Weil quadratic voting article in AER, the last part, they talk about this. They say, well, in the private asset setting, they believe the equivalent of quadratic voting is Vickery's continuous auction. Well, that's kind of what this is. Okay, it's obviously closely related to Henry George too. So how does Henry George work? Well, you have your land. We're gonna make you pay the full rent of the land, okay, as a tax, right? And so it's basically like not owning the land. You're basically renting the land. Here, you win the auction. You're basically renting this. Why? Because somebody else can kick you out who's willing to pay more rent. They're willing to. So you have a later bidder. You have control for a while. You have a later person. They can do a new auction and kick you out. Okay, so this is terrible. It's like, Vaughn, you have your house. Well, anytime you're paying this rent, well, maybe I want to pay more rent, and you have to leave, right? Now, of course, we're not going to do it with houses because there's a transaction. There's like personal values and all that stuff. There's all these arguments, but this is basically equivalent, in some sense, intellectually, to a Henry George or a William Vickery operation. Plus, it's related to the Harburger tax. Okay. Now, that being said, you could apply this to the corporate world. Actually, you can't. It would be, most likely, it would be illegal for reasons that I don't think are very good. And I do have I'm going to write a sequel paper, because there's also additional constraints involved with the corporate world. Even if you put this for public companies, there's additional constraints because there's other parts out there that are not subject to this rule, and you have to worry about the boundaries. Like we're not going to apply this to all businesses, okay? I'm not going to walk into Worst. This is applied to all businesses. I say, I kind of liked Worst. I walk in there and I say, guess what? We're having an auction tomorrow. Get your investment bankers and let's see who's going to win. That's not going to happen, okay? So we have to decide how the transitions work. This is kind of abstract, but
in a way, it does happen, right? Thank you. Boards and shareholders for corporate firms, they're constantly replacing management teams. And it's not just because the old management team is a bad team. It could be the new one just has a better plan for what to do with those assets. I think the thing that makes it hard is that information asymmetry cost, right? The old team, you gotta know what the positives and negatives are. It's hard to know for this new team with a new plan how well they can actually execute on it.
Yeah, and so we have a similarity to your point inside DAOs right now, okay? So we have the entrenched control. Well, it might be that the people that have entrenched control do have the best plan, okay? And it might also be that we have things inside the DAO where we're kind of doing the same kind of management selection thing. And also it might be, in many ways you could argue that DAO is given implicit control and that it shifts over time, that it's really not much different than this. You're shifting control around. So what's the difference? In the mechanism, we're attempting to shift control around in an optimal way so that we have the best business plan, and who gets to benefit also from the distribution of surplus? Who is that? The Jensen McLean free riders, okay? And so we're doing that. So the idea is that this might be better that. And in the corporate setting, this is basically an external method of corporate governance, okay, to take over the control market. And we're basically playing on that. So that's also, this is exactly analogous to that. Well, we were talking about the internal. Internal, we have, we want to make sure we like everything, the board to be working well, and they're appointing the managers, et cetera. But we're adding the external layer, which might say, okay, this board did pretty well, but not as well as they could. And with the Jensen-Meckley free riders, they can have more without doing anything. Okay, all right, anyway.
Quick
Leo.
question on this is in an auction with a lot of players, you expect the bidding to be competitive, and you would expect the bid of I believe it was C, that was the right triangle, or I guess the blue part of that,
Yeah.
to come down to marginal cost. But if this requires huge deposits, 6 billion for Uniswap. Okay, well now not too many players can participate, right? So somebody participates and says, I'm going to put up the 6 billion plus whatever the amount of expected surplus is, and then somebody else can come in and say, okay, well I have a similar plan and I'm just going to put the value like a little bit higher, like a penny higher, but I'm going to take the rest of that incremental surplus that it generates, and that's still beneficial to everyone because you just have to leave a little bit on there, right? And so it could very well be that a lot of the surplus just simply gets eroded back to the person doing the work rather than to the free riders.
Yeah, so
because there just isn't
so
enough people to outcompete you at that level.
So we have so there's super good points. We have leakage of surplus because and it appears that like things like the criminal claim condition don't apply here, and so under existing game theory, I see no way of getting full surplus extraction in this environment. And so now bidding intensity is going to matter a lot. Bidding intensity, I need lots of bidders, and capital markets and capital market depth. And this mechanism for this to work, capital market depth is a crucial thing. Now, what are my thoughts about that? Well, we could talk about that, but I've gone for 54 minutes, or 53 minutes at this point. Let's see what, there's a lot of things we haven't talked about. Let's talk about how does this match up with the values of DAOs? This doesn't, in one way, this kind of looks bad because we're having, somebody's getting control.
Yeah, on that note, I was just going to say, this just sounds like it's primed for private equity to start taking over all these DAOs. So.
Okay, so so that's a concern. And one way of putting this is, let's see, 30. Let's go 29. Okay, so another way of thinking of this is, does this enhance decentralization? Okay, there's a lot of things we can talk about there. One is, we've broken the entrenchment. Okay, so compared to what? We've broken the entrenchment. Is this better than that? Yeah, because it looks like, you can make an argument. This is a claim. We can evaluate kind of, scientifically. Another thing that's really important, though, is suppose there's something about voting we really like, or something about, a DAO where it's in its default state that we really like. There's some participation. Okay, well, here's an interesting thing. If we really like that, what's going to happen? Well, that could increase the token value, right? And so the control party, if people value that governance part of the DAO, then control party can't win. The control party that has similar operational quality can't win the auction. Okay, but even more, voting has a lot of problems, like a lot of very serious problems, especially pure voting where we don't have transferable utility. We just have people voting, and we don't have bribery. You can't buy votes. We can't, Then there's really severe social choice problems that basically predict that almost any kind of voting thing that has pure voting is going to meet its end at some point. However, we can avoid that now. If something goes wrong with the voting, the token value starts dropping. We have an auction. The entrepreneur comes in, they can either reset the current voting thing, fix the, we can bail it out, or they can also reform it during the control period. So this creates a very powerful tool to do exactly, to enhance exactly the participation ideals that motivate DAOs, okay? That's something interesting about this. It's a way to make it safe for voting and participation in a lot of these values that are values that many of us in this room really like, but they have all these problems, social choice problems, right? And we can fix it. We have something that fixes that and makes this safe to be that kind of pure participation kind of thing. These are all just like, I call this a claim. These are is a claim, because a claim like a math claim. I claim this, right? And I'm kind of interested in it objectively, whether it's true. I promised people that have seen the talk before that there would be something new.
Well, new is that we're all here. I want to do a little checking on time. Vaughn, how are we doing?
Yeah, if you have another point, you should just do it.
I'm doing one more. I get only one more point.
You get one more.
Yeah, one more point.
I'll put a market together for it.
Okay, regulation. Okay, all right. I'm doing this point with this 4 stars. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So if we do this approach, it might make securities and commodities regulation largely irrelevant and unnecessary. That's my new point. Why? Why? Because what's the regulation doing? We're protecting the people that bought the Orange Grove. This is Howie, right? Who bought the Orange Grove contracts? The poor, uninformed investors. Who's that? It's us, right? It's us. Are we protected in this scheme? Yeah. We can't, we can't lose our money. Not only we can't lose our money, but if somebody makes a claim, they have to pay if they don't do the claim. So do we need Howie? Do we need securities reg? Well, I'm making this is a little kind of a fast argument. Maybe not. So now what we can do, let me just ask Aaron this, okay? So like if we put this on Uniswap and it guaranteed that you were not subject to this kind of regulation, how would you like that?
I would like that. I think that it would take, so I basically buy the argument, but I think that like there's a hurdle to get over, and there's an educational hurdle with the SEC probably that is non-trivial.
Yeah, and so we have to go, but now notice what we're doing though. Hester Pierce and a lot of other people, including people in Europe. Why does Europe exempt fully decentralized projects in MiCA? Because they don't need regulation, because the aspects of decentralization replace regulation. That's exactly the argument here. One of the strong arguments about, and it's actually a complex argument, is certain aspects of decentralized projects the regulatory rules, it satisfies some of the regulatory rules and we don't need them, okay? So this is just an argument along those lines. Now, what do I have to do? So Aaron sounds a little bit sold. So what do I have to do? So here's what we're gonna do.
I'm also primed to be sold.
Okay, yeah, okay. If I can't sell to you, it's hopeless, right? Okay, all right. All right, so what we're gonna do with this is there are protocols that are interested in doing this with experimentally, and we can do a bunch of experiments, and it might be that this doesn't work, I don't know. We'll do a bunch of experiments, mostly on probably startup DAOs, and we'll see how this works, and then maybe a little while from now, we can talk to the big people. This is the biggest people. The biggest people.
I am sold on the mechanism. I think the problem with using it to excise regulation is that regulators are disinclined to give up power, even if their regulatory ambit isn't necessary, right?
Okay.
So there's
That's true, but also there's a stochastic element here. Hester Pierce could be the commissioner, the chair of the SEC in January 2025.
She could be, but there's still a whole other kind of regulatory apparatus that she will have to kind of exist inside. So I love the ambition.
Okay.
So So,
But let's
yeah,
be
biggest
happy.
challenge.
Let's be optimistic, and maybe we can finally leave the nightmare of this regulatory nightmare. Maybe we can leave it behind.
If anyone wants to be optimistic, it is Joshua. That's Joshua, by the way, as a short introduction. Investment partner at Washington Capital at BCAP, and also background as the general counsel there. So I think fights the regulatory battle every day, and hopes that we can see this more optimistic.
Yeah, we're gonna give you a lightsaber 100 years before the other people invent
Yeah,
it.
I want that. I want that. Let's
get
do
it
it.
for 'em. There's gonna be all good things. We're gonna take a moment of break here, but
Thank you.